All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm glad that you're here, and hopefully when we're done, you'll be glad you were here too. This is how to predict test questions. I'm going to explain that in a minute, but I wanted to say one thing before I start. The next 5 workshops starting today all have that word in the title, and a lot of students are good students, except when they take tests. And then they're not so good. And so whether you're able to come to all 5 or as many as you can, I'm going to try to give you all kinds of ideas of how to prepare for tests right, how to take tests well, what to do if you get nervous during a test to think again, all those things. So those are all coming up in these next weeks. This is what we're going to talk about today primarily, but before I even get into that, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is kind of a strange question for me to start, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you were taking a college class, especially a difficult one, and your teacher passed out the test to you 2 or 3 days before the real test and gave you 10 minutes or so to look through the questions, would that be a helpful thing? Yeah, I assume so. Is that ever going to happen? Probably not. So today is kind of like the next best thing in a way. My goal with this is to help you realize that you can actually read and study your textbooks a different way than most people do. That starts to get you inside the mind of the teacher. That's a scary place to be sometimes, inside the mind of the teacher. But to try to anticipate or predict what test questions you'll see on the real thing. If you can learn to do that, you'll know the answer to them because you will have studied them ahead of time, and that's to your advantage. And so that's what we're going to go through. So out of these 3 ideas or techniques, the one we're going to start with and we're actually going to spend the most time on is this first one here. And before I teach this to you, and I'm going to give you a handout and sort of show you how it works, I want to tell you a little story, a little illustration. When one of my 2 daughters was very little, about 3 or 4 or 5 years old, she was the world champion of something. And when you have the world champion living in your house, that's pretty nice. It's the best in the whole world. Except that what she was the world champion of was question asking. And if you've ever been around small children at a certain age, they drive everyone crazy around them asking questions. And it drives you crazy if you get that, but actually it's a wonderful quality for a child to have. They're so hungry to learn about everything. They don't know anything. And one of the main ways that children learn is by asking questions. My daughter would be walking with me. She would see someone crossing the street, and she would say, "Who is that? Where is he going? Why is he wearing that?" Questions all the time. She could ask 20 or 30 questions in about 2 minutes. And I'm a very patient person, but everybody has their limit. And one time, just to show you how often she asked questions, she had asked me about 20 or 30 questions in the last 5 minutes, and we were at home. And I asked her something very politely. I said, "Daddy needs a little break for a few minutes. I have something I have to do, so could you do me a favor and go to your room and play with all those toys I bought you? And then you can come back later and you can ask me more questions." That's a very polite way of saying it, right? Well, instead of saying, "Okay," and then running down the hall, what do you think she said? Yeah, she said, "Why?" And I thought, another question. Questions all the time. And what we want, and that's what this is designed to do, is to get you to be like a little child again. Most children are like sponges, and they just are so excited to learn everything. When they become adults, bad things happen. To at least most people, they lose most of the curiosity they had when they were little. I use this as an example. Can I borrow this book for a second? This is about the scariest book I know, so I want to use this. Okay, when was the last time you walked up to a textbook to open it up to read it, and before you even opened it, you said, "Oh man, I can't wait to see what's in here today"? Okay, nobody does this. No, but people say, never. What do? You say, "What page? I hope this isn't too boring or too hard. I've got a show on in a half hour," or whatever. So it's like punishment to sit and read the book for a lot of people. Well, I don't know if I can ever get you to where you're so excited that you wake up in the morning thinking, "Where's a textbook?" That'd be pretty good if I could do that. But if I can even get it part way that way, that would be good, and that's what I'm going for. Okay? So the first one, again, is asking questions, but it's specifically of chapter headings. Is this going to work in every textbook that you have? The answer is no. It depends on the subject. If you have an English book that has lots of stories and novels or whatever, this doesn't apply. But if you're in a regular kind of class, kind of like that one, that has a lot of factual information that's presented, it's got a lot of headings and subheadings in it, this should work really well. You just have to practice it and learn how to do it. And so that's what I'm going to show you. The first thing that I want to draw is a little diagram, and I'm actually going to give you a handout that shows this in a second, but I just want you to kind of get the idea of how this works first. Normally, when somebody uses this technique, what they do is they get out a sheet of notebook paper and they draw a line right across the middle. And the reason you do that is because you don't need usually a whole piece of paper for this. You only need a half, and then you can do another one down here, so it saves a little paper, a little space. And then you're going to end up writing some information on the sides and then starting to write in the middle. That's kind of the format. So I want to show you what this looks like. And I'm going to be asking you a few questions in a couple of minutes. And I want you to see if you can come up with answers. Since we're talking about asking questions, I'm going to ask you a few. Okay, now before we go through this, what's the first word you see at the very top of this page? Active, right? What's the opposite of active? Passive. Yeah, passive, inactive, or there's one other word that starts with L. Lazy. Most students, when they read textbooks, are very lazy. And it doesn't look like that, because if I walked up to you and you had the book open and you were leaning over, it looks like you're being very active. But up here, who knows what's going on? And this is, again, supposed to try to fix that. So as you look between the dotted lines here, you see this little form, which is what you would actually write on your notebook paper. So you would write the name of the textbook, the chapter, the page number, especially the big bold print heading that you see on that page. Okay? And then the most important part of this is along the left side, those 6 words you see there that everybody knows. These are the 6 best friends of a learner. That's kind of what they're called. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. You just write them out. And then again, you're going to do the same thing down here. And so that's what you do to sort of prepare it. Okay, then here's a quick question for you. What's the goal of most people when they open up their textbook and start reading?
To understand.
Say again? Yeah, what is it supposed to be? It's to learn and master and memorize and all that's good. For most people, they open it up and they think, how long is this going to take? Can I stay awake till it's done? And their just goal is to finish. That's not a very good goal, but that's what it is for a lot of people. Well, this is giving you a new goal that's way better than that. And so what you do is and let me ask this too, when you're reading a textbook, okay, let me draw a little book here, and you've got a heading here and you've got a heading over here. When you read through this material and you get to here and you're going to start something new, what do most people do as soon as they read the heading?
Start reading?
Yeah, they keep reading. Why? It's because they're trying to get to the end, right? So they just read, 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 read. That's the way most people do it. Well, this is asking you to stop and not do that. So here's the way you do it. You read through whatever you're reading, and then when you get to a brand new heading, instead of reading, you stop for about 2 to 3 minutes. This is all this is supposed to take, so it's quick. And what you're supposed to do, and that's where this comes in, is you're supposed to brainstorm by looking at the heading that you've written right here and coming up with questions that start with who, what, where, when, why, and how that might be answered when you actually read that. Okay, and so to show you kind of what this looks like, I want you to turn over to the back side of the paper and you'll see an example of something that's basically done, at least this first part. This is from an accounting textbook. And the chapter 4, page 118, big bold print heading at the top that said preparing a worksheet. So the next few pages were all about that, teaching a student that. Rather than reading it and then just starting to read about it, this person did what I just described. They took a couple of minutes and wrote down every question they could think of that might be answered when they read that little section. So they started with who, and they thought, okay, who? Preparing a worksheet. Well, who's supposed to prepare a worksheet? And then they thought, well, who uses it once it's prepared? And then they couldn't think of any other who questions, so they went to what? And when you're doing this, you don't have to go in order. You just kind of brainstorm. Whatever pops in your head, that's what you write down. Now, are you going to find the answer to all these questions when you read that section? Yeah, hardly ever, right? Because you don't know anything except just the heading, so you're just sort of thinking out loud and writing down everything you can think of really fast. After 2 or 3 minutes, you're ready to read, okay? And how many questions are you actually going to come up with? I have no idea, but people who have done this before have shown it to me, and sometimes they've come up with 3 or 4 questions in 3 minutes. That's not brainstorming, that's like a little drizzle. Not very much. Other people have shown me, and they've done 15 questions, almost as fast as they could write. The more you do this, the faster you get at it, because your brain starts working that way. In this little example that we're looking at, this person came up with 10 questions. And there's nothing special about that number, it's just how many they came up with. Okay, so after you do this, then you start reading the section. So now here's the most important question about all of this. We said before that the goal of most people was to finish. When you do this first and then you start reading, what's your goal now? That's a lot better. Yeah, find the answers to your questions. Okay, and so one of the things I always like to go through, because I think it motivates people, is that there are 3 benefits to doing this method that usually make it better than just reading and then closing the book. And if you know what those are, hopefully you'll be motivated to do them. The first one has to do with what I just described, and that is that if you do this right, it helps you to concentrate better. And anything that you do that helps you concentrate better on your reading is a really good thing to do, because it's hard to concentrate. Okay, why would this help you concentrate better? Well, most people, again, are just trying to make it through the chapter and sort of learn what they can, but their mind tends to wander because they're just sort of trying to go through it. When you do it this way, you have the questions right next to you, and as you're reading, you're going to find the answer to one of them, and you'll think, oh, that's that one right there. And then later on, oh, that's that one. And so you have something particular that you're looking for when you read. That makes even the most boring book in the world a lot more interesting, because you have a point when you read, and so it helps you focus better. Okay, so that's the first one. Now, question for you about this. As you're reading through this material, let's say that you find the answer to this question right there in the book. What do you do? Write it down. Where do you write it? Yeah, there are a lot of things you could do, but I want to show you what I would suggest, and it's because it's related to this next benefit. If you find the answer to this question, you say, there it is right there. You turn the page over. It's blank back there because this is a piece of notebook paper, and right on the other side, you write the answer, and then you go back, you find the answer to this one, you write it here, so all the answers go directly on the back side of the paper, okay? And the reason that that's important is because of this. Anytime you use anything while you're reading, if it doesn't do this, then it was a waste of time. So this is supposed to do this. It provides you with a good study tool. Okay? Let's say that you get to the end of this section of the book, these few pages, and you go back and you say, okay, I got that one, I got that one, I didn't get that one, I got that one, and you're kind of checking. Let's say that out of these 10 questions, you come up with an answer to 6 of them. The other 4 were stupid questions, but you didn't know that at the time, or they were good questions, but they're just not answered there, so you just cross them out. Well, now you have 6 questions here and 6 answers back here. How are you going to study this to get ready for your big test? What are you going to do with it? Yeah, you're going to test yourself like flashcards. You don't have to make flashcards because it's already in that form. So you're looking at the question and you're trying to test yourself. One of the things that's true about all of these things, plus some other activities that I give you in other workshops, is the best thing you could ever do while studying is test yourself a lot before the teacher tests you. That way you find out. The worst time ever for you to find out you don't know something as well as you thought is when you're sitting there taking the test. And you think, boy, I thought I knew that. Ooh, boy, I thought I knew that too. That's a bad feeling. It's better to find out 2 days before the test when you're testing yourself at home and you realize, wow, I don't know that, because then you have time to fix it before you go take the real test. That's the design of this, okay? And so, even if your questions on your real test are not like this, they're not like little short answer, they may be multiple choice or true false, it doesn't matter. You're learning the information here, okay? And so that's the second benefit. And then the third one is this. This is the final payoff, and that is that it helps you on the test. And that's good. That's kind of what you want. And so I want to ask you this. I've had this happen to me personally. I've had a lot of students tell me this, so I want to see if you can figure this out. If you do what I just showed you here, and you work through your chapter and come up with questions and answers, when you get to the real test and the teacher hands you the test and you start reading the questions and answering them, what do you think you're going to see every once in a while when you read the questions? Yeah, you're going to see some of yours. And it's a weird feeling to be taking a test and read a question and think, oh yeah, I wrote that. It's odd, okay? But when you recognize a question on a test as one that you wrote, is that good news?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope. Unless you didn't study right, because you think, I know that. Because you know the answer. It's on the back of your little study sheet that you used. And so even if your test has 50 questions on it, and you recognize only 10 of them as being exactly what you wrote, that's 10 more than everybody else in the room who just read the material and stared at it and hoped that they would remember it. And so it gives you an advantage over everybody. Most people who do this, when they see questions on the test every once in a while that look exactly like the ones they wrote, their first thought, they always tell me, they have about 1 second, only 1 second, where they feel guilty, like they're cheating, like they got to see the questions ahead of time. But that passes really fast because it's not cheating. And they just say, oh, I got that. Yeah, I know that one. And so if you've studied and you've also done this, it gives you an advantage because you're trying to, again, think in questions and answers when you study instead of just staring at the material and hoping that you remember it. Now, one last thing specifically about this is that a lot of students understand this when I teach it and say, yeah, I bet that would be good. But their number one complaint, I guess if you want to call it that, is time. They're saying, I barely have enough time to read my chapters, let alone sit there and write out all these questions and answers. It seems like you'll never sleep again. If you do this, it would take hours every day. Actually, it doesn't. It takes a little more time for you to do this than it does to read, obviously straight through. But what do most people find when they finish reading a chapter and they go back over it in terms of how much they remember? Yeah, not much. So what do they have to do often? They have to read it again, sometimes even like 3 times. Well, if you do it this way, normally all you have to do is read the chapter once and then go back and study it this way. And so doing this takes a little longer while you're doing it, but it saves time later. And it's not that you can necessarily do this with every textbook and with every heading and every chapter, but the more you do it, the more you start thinking like the teacher does and coming up with those questions and answers. The other thing I wanted to say about this is that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, most people who start doing this tell me that at first it's a little bit slow and their brainstorming isn't working too well, but the more they do it, their brain starts going faster and faster, and pretty soon they can think of so many questions they almost can't write them down fast enough. It's kind of like they're training their brain to think this way. And my favorite little final example, and then we're going to move on to this next one, is this. I had a student a few years ago who told me later in the semester after I taught this, he said, you know, when you taught that thing about the who, what, where, when, why, and how, he said, I kind of like that idea because I was the laziest reader in the world. I would read something and close the book and I had no idea what I just read. And I started doing that and it really helped. And it helped me to concentrate. I studied better, I got better grades. And whenever I hear that, that's really encouraging. I say, that's good to hear. Except after he said all those nice things about it, he said this, believe it or not. He said, but you've ruined my life. And I said, well, that's not good. I don't ever want to do that. I said, how did I do that? And what he said was really good, made me laugh, even though I don't know if he was saying it that way. He said, I got so used to this, doing this, that now when I'm walking down the street and I pass a newspaper stand and I look and I see the headline in the newspaper, he said something terrible happens. And what do you think that would be? Yeah, he asks questions like a little child, like I said at the very beginning. So he looks and it says, Senate passes bill. And in the past, he would have just looked at that and thought, whatever. But now as he's walking away, what's the bill? Who wrote it? When does it take effect? Who does it affect? And he can't turn it off. And I told him, if that's the way I ruined your life, I'm so happy. Because all of us should be a lot more like that. So again, this is sort of an artificial, forced way to get you like a child again, thinking and being all curious. And so many of us have lost that by the time we get to be even teenagers. And so this is a way to do it. Okay? So this is first idea. Any questions on this one? We kind of skip through little parts of this handout, and you can feel free to read the whole thing later, and it'll kind of, I guess, review a little of what we went through. Okay, so the second one, which we're going to spend most of the rest of the time on, has to do with creating your own study quizzes. And a lot of times when I bring up this topic, people look at me and they say, didn't you just teach us how to do that? Because that's what I just did, was teach you how to come up with questions, who, what, where, when, why, how. But this is a little different. This has to do with chapter headings. This has to do with all the stuff in the chapter, all the actual facts that appear under that. So what I want to do is I want to give you a page that is from a real college textbook, and I'm going to use this to sort of illustrate a couple of things to you about how you could read textbooks differently than the way that you might now. Again, it's just trying to get you more active, thinking more, and coming up with some good study techniques. That's the whole point of this. Okay, so this is from a textbook in what subject? I'm going to start that right there with you. Okay. What is this from?
This is from the last. This is from the last thing.
Right.
Remember the first thing that you taught?
Yeah, that was from.
Look at that.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah. So related to this, has anybody here ever taken an astronomy class before? Yeah. That's why I picked this, because most people look at this and say, I've never seen anything like this. So that means we're all starting sort of from scratch, which is what I want. Now, I want you to imagine for about the next 10 or 15 minutes, and I know this is a big jump for you, but I want you to imagine this. You are no longer a student, so congratulations. You graduated, and you're not only not a student anymore, you're a teacher. And not only are you a teacher, you're an astronomy teacher. So that's a big jump for almost everybody in here, okay? If you were an astronomy teacher, and this is in your book that you assign to your students, and you want to test them on how well they learned this, what you have to do is what teachers do every day, which is to look at all the information and turn it into questions, create a test. If you can learn to do that just as well as a teacher, it's going to be a big advantage to you when you study. So that's what I want to show you now. At the very top of this page, you see a table or a chart with 4 planets and different spacecrafts that we sent quite a few years ago to kind of fly by those and take pictures and explore them. Then, under where it says Jupiter's outer layers, you have all these facts, all these details. So, first thing I want to show you about this is that in my experience working with students, the 2 easiest kind of questions for a student to learn how to make for themselves, quickly are these. Fill in the blank and true, false. You can make up a multiple choice question, you can make up an essay question, but those take a little bit longer. And so I want to show you these, even if your questions in your classes are not fill in or true, false. Again, it doesn't matter, you still learn the material. So I want to show you a couple of examples of this and ask you to help me with this. If you take a look at the very first sentence on the page, right under Jupiter's outer layers, I want to read this to you, and then I want to ask you something. Okay, it says the first close-up look at Jupiter was provided by Pioneers 10 and 11 in December 1973 and December 1974, respectively. Okay, so that's just one sentence. Okay, put your teacher hat on for a second. If you wanted to create a fill-in-the-blank statement where one word is taken out and a blank is put in its place, from that sentence, what you would have to do, which is pretty simple, is look back at the sentence we just read and ask yourself this. What word is very important in that sentence? And so there isn't just one. There are several possibilities, but what's an important word in there?
Provided.
Jupiter, provided might be. What else? First. What else? Yeah, that could be, dates could be, etc. So if you made up and wrote down a fill-in-the-blank statement about this, one example of it would be this. Pioneers 10 and 11 provided the first close-up look at blank. And then you're done. Do you have a question? Or the first close-up look at Jupiter was provided by blank 10 and 11. Or other possibilities as well. So to create a fill-in question, you don't have to think of a question, like pull it out of the air. You just take what's there and write it again and leave a word out and put a blank in its place. That's about as easy as it gets, okay? I want to show you one other example of this, and then I'll show you this, and then I'm going to put you to work on something for a couple minutes. If you look at the middle paragraph over on this side, I want you to look at the first sentence of that paragraph. The first three words you can kind of ignore where it says as previously mentioned, so you don't need to worry about that. But look at the rest of that sentence, and I want to ask you the same question after I've read it, and that is, what word are you going to take out and put a blank in its place? So again, this says the chemical composition of Jupiter is very similar to that of the Sun, about 98% hydrogen and helium. Now, I see all kinds of test question possibilities in there. So what would be something that you could take out that would be important? Hydrogen or helium? What else? Yeah, something related to that. What else? The percentage. Numbers are always easy for teachers. Just take that out. You could also take out sun or similar. Lots of choices, right? So for a fill-in this blank statement, here's what one would sound like. The chemical composition of Jupiter is very similar to that of the blank. And that's it. Okay? Then, as you could also say the chemical composition of Jupiter is about blank percent hydrogen and helium, or about 98% blank and helium, etc. Again, all these possibilities. So usually once you've started to do this even a few times, it becomes very simple because you know how to do it. Again, it's nothing complicated. Then when it comes to true false, here's the other question. How do you create a true statement to write down as a little test question out of something in a textbook? What do you have to do? It's supposed to be the easiest thing ever. Yeah, find a fact and write it. Ta-da, you're done, okay? So same sentence over here, you could say, the chemical composition of Jupiter is very similar to that of the Sun. True or false? And you're done. So again, that's the easiest thing ever. Now, here's the most fun one. How do you make one of those? Yeah, you lie. That's what you do. And usually you get in trouble in life when you lie, but this is one of those times you don't. You change something. So I want to see how good a liar you are, okay? Take a look at that same sentence we've been looking at, and what would you change or lie about that would be a really good false statement?
It's very not similar.
Yeah, one of the things a lot of people come up with is the chemical composition of Jupiter is not very similar to that of the Sun. So it's just the opposite of what it says. So that's good. What else besides that?
The numbers.
Yeah, the number. And listen to this. Don't even look at your paper. Just look up here for a second. Listen to how true this sounds. The chemical composition of Jupiter is about 89% hydrogen and helium. You look at that and say, okay, that sounds right to me. Lie, right? Wrong number. Okay, what else could you change?
Hydrogen and helium?
Right, so you could say the chemical composition of Jupiter is about 98% hydrogen and oxygen. Something like that. So that's how you create a false statement. So all of these, once you again just practice them a few times, they start coming really easily. And most pages of most textbooks that have lots of information on them, you can find so many questions all over the place that might end up being on the test in one form or another. And again, that's the whole point, is you're trying to predict or sort of anticipate those. So what I want to do for just a couple of minutes is to put you to work on something. Okay, and I know that you haven't read this, okay, and we've only looked at 2 sentences on the whole page, but I want to give you a little test, and you can relax totally because you're not going to hand it in to me. This should be the most relaxed you'll ever be in your life taking a test. And I know that you won't know the answers to most of these because we haven't read the page yet, but what I want you to do is be a detective. And I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes, and all I want you to do is look back and forth from this to this and see how many of the answers to these you can find in the time that I give you. I don't think anyone will be able to find all of them, but even if you can find 4 or 5 or 6, that would be good. And the reason I want you to do this is not to learn about Jupiter, but it's so you can kind of see how the questions were created. That's the whole point. 10 fill in the blank, 3 true, false, and 2 multiple choice. 15 questions from 1 page. So you'd be happy I'm not your astronomy teacher, because if we had a 30-page chapter, that'd be 450 questions. That'd be scary, right? So I want you to, again, just take this and start looking around. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop you there. Again, whether you got a lot of answers or just a few, that's okay either way. Normally, when you do something like this, you wouldn't do it the way we just did it. You would create some questions and type them up or write them out, and then after you've read the material, you'd go back and test yourself and maybe even make copies of it and test yourself several times until you learned it. But I wanted you, again, whenever you find an answer, you think, oh, there it is, right there, and that's, again, how you learn how to make these. I'm going to give you the answers to these, and again, you're never going to need to know this ever in your life unless you take an astronomy class, but I just want to see how you did on this. The first one is 10. Number 2 is 1664. Number 3 is Earth. 4 is 6. Number 5 is the spelling word for the day, which is equatorial. Number 6 is detail. 7, you all should have known that one because we looked at that. What is the answer for that? Sun, right? And then number 8 is Saturn. Number 9 is 50,000. 10 is another one you should know, and that's helium. And then number 1 under the true false, did anybody get that one?
True?
Yeah, it's true. It actually says that directly, right? How about number 2?
Is it false?
It's false. What did it say on the page? Yeah, it says that the ring is thin. So I put thick, opposite of it, right? And then how about number 3? Anybody get that?
True.
That one's also false. It actually says right there on the page, Jupiter's atmosphere does not rotate as a solid unit. So again, I gave you the opposite. Then under the multiple choice, number 1 is D, and number 2 is A. Okay, and again, regardless of how many you got, that was just to show you how those kind of questions are created. Okay, and so to follow up on this, and for the last little teaching of the day, I want to talk to you just for a couple minutes about studying, thank you, with a partner or group. Did anybody else miss the sign-in sheet, or did it get to everybody? Yeah, we're good? Okay, let me do this now so I can, okay, good. So I'll let these teachers know. How many of you have ever studied for a test with another person or a small group? Okay, a few of you. How did it work? Was it helpful, not helpful?
Not helpful.
Yeah, you know what some people have said? Really helpful. Other people, they don't even say anything. Just, oh. They got together at somebody's house. The snacks were wonderful. They sampled every snack in the whole house. They spent half the time complaining about the teacher, and then they left saying, thanks, this was great. And then as they walked away, they thought, we didn't even really do anything. Other times it works. I'm going to give you one idea. It's not the only one, but it's worked well for students in the past about how you can study with one other person or a small group. And here's what it is. Let's say that your teacher today in your class gives you the information that you have a test coming up 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line, and that it's going to cover chapters 8 through 10 in your book along with the lectures that they do. One thing that we could do that would be very smart this way would be this, for example. Let's say that the three of us were in a class together. We run to each other right after class on the day that this is announced, and we say something like this. I'll take chapter 8, you take 9, and you take 10. Okay, so we make that little plan, and then we make a date to get together to study maybe a day or two before the real test. Okay, now, if we do that, we have these 3 chapters, right, and they're assigned to individual people. This is my chapter right here. So my job between that day and the time we meet is to go home and read this chapter really carefully and do one other thing with it. What would that be?
Take care of the notes.
Yeah, do what I've just shown you, which is to create a quiz. Type it up, make like 10 copies of it. On one of the copies, write answer key at the top and write in all the answers, whether they're multiple choice or true, false, or whatever, okay? What are they supposed to do? Same exact thing, they better, with their chapters, right? Because this is our deal. And then when we come together for our study session, the very first thing we do is we pull out copies of our little quiz that we made, and I give one to you, and one to myself. I have to take mine, and then they do the same. So we just kind of are like the teacher for a minute handing out the test. And then we sit there quietly for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, and we take all the little quizzes. When we're done, we hand them back to the person who brought it. They pull out their answer key and turn back into the teacher for a minute and correct them and then hand them back. All of that's very simple to do, okay? Once we're done with that, how do we spend the rest of our time together? Okay. Instead of just sort of where are the snacks, or well, what should we do, or whatever, which people say all the time, we're going to start with my chapter because it's the first one. And so I say this, okay, question number 1 on my little quiz. She says, correct. He says, correct. I say, correct. We all got it right. So what do we do?
Just repeat it. Move on.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it. We're all clear on it. So go to number 2. How about, though, and this will happen a lot, how about if one of us misses it and the other 2 get it right? Then what do we do?
Discuss it.
Yeah, we discuss it. And you know how we discuss it? One of the best ways you could ever study is to explain something to somebody else. So let's say the 2 of us got this first one right and he got it wrong. We explain it to him. Later on, she's going to be the only one to miss one. Sometime I'm going to be the only one, so everybody will have their turn, and we get to sort of teach each other those things. Okay, when we're done, and we've gone through all of these, then the good thing to do is, I mentioned making like 10 copies, and people say, why would you make 10 copies when you only have a couple people? It's so that you can give each person 2 or 3 other ones that they can take home and practice again, take again. And so by doing this, instead of you having to make up all these quizzes on the whole chapters, you get to split up the work. And if I came up with a quiz that had 15 questions, and the 2 of them did too, then all of us would have 45 potential test questions to keep practicing before we walked in to take the test. And I know that at least some of those would show up on the real test, which again would be an advantage. Okay? And then one last thing about this. Before I go into our study session together, how much of this do I need to have read? Yeah, all of it. And some people say, oh, all of it? They got excited for a second thinking I just have to read one of the 3 chapters and then everybody else can teach me the rest. There's a good way to get an F on any test you ever take. The reason that I have to read all 3 of these is because I'm going to take a test that they give me, and the whole purpose of those tests is to say this. Our test is tomorrow or it's the next day. I've studied and I think I'm ready. Am I really? only one way to find out, and that is take the tests. So if I don't take the test, if I just read my chapter and half of hers and I don't even read his, it's a waste of time for me to even go to the session. It's kind of like a dress rehearsal before the real test. So you still have to do all the work with the reading, but you only have to make a quiz out of one chapter. And remember, that little quiz that I gave you, how many questions were on there again? It was 15 out of how many pages? 1. So if you were looking through a chapter and trying to come up with 15 or 20 questions, it doesn't take a lot of time, and usually all you have to do is find bold print words and then turn those into questions, and you could come up with 50 questions from a chapter usually, or 100, but all you're doing is like maybe 15 or 20, and then once you end up with that, you're helping other people, you're helping yourself, kind of good all the way around. Okay, so that's one idea. It's not the only way to study with a group or partner, but it's worked well for people in the past. And they can even eat snacks while they're doing that. But at least they get a lot done, and that's the whole purpose. Okay? All right, we're done. So I will contact your teachers later. Thanks for coming. And again, next week, we're going to talk about how to spend the last few days before a test the smartest way so that when you walk in there, you're ready to go and perform well.